Yesterday, we talked about Dexter Taylor, the 53-year-old Brooklyn man who was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for violating ghost law rules. The judge told Dexter Taylor and his attorneys that the Second Amendment does not exist in New York, does not exist in the courtroom. A software engineer and a father with no criminal record was legally buying things that you can construct a gun out of, never took the guns out of his apartment, is now going to serve 10 years in federal prison in a state, New York, where a judge is saying the Second Amendment does not exist. Hey, look, this guy may have broken some laws and some technicalities. Slap on the wrist, very appropriate. 10 years is absolutely ridiculous. We're happy to be joined by his lawyer, Vinoo Varghese. Did I get that right, Vinoo?
Vinoo Close Varghese, enough, Jason. Vinoo Varghese, but it's great to be on your show,
Vinoo
Jason.
Varghese.
Big fan, following
great
you
to
for
have
years.
You. Oh, awesome. Appreciate it. What happened here? How did this happen?
So Dexter, I'll just give you a little background on the story. Dexter, you mentioned his age. He's in his 50s. He's a young man in his 50s, Brooklyn guy. He is Caribbean roots. He's a Black American with Caribbean roots, born in Queens, went to Stuyvesant High School, which is one of the top high schools in the country, graduated at 16 years old, went to Johns Hopkins, was there for a bit, and like other entrepreneurs and people, dropped out of Johns Hopkins and became an engineer and created a wonderful life for himself as a data engineer, a software engineer at after Johns Hopkins. He lived in Baltimore, and then he moved back up to New York. Was a builder. He would just build things. So he has a 16-year-old daughter, currently 16. He's got parents in their 80s. What he did in the years of 2021 and 2022 during COVID lockdowns was that he was thinking of a potential new career, and he was into weapons science. He was always fascinated by guns, wanted to know how they worked. He ultimately thought he could become a consultant to the U.S. military and the NYPD and perhaps other law enforcement. So what he did was buy parts legally. I mean, with his own credit card, shipped to his own house. You can buy these parts in New York. So what happened is, though, he attracted the attention of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So the ATF has a way of tracking anyone who buys any types of parts online. And what they do is, because they don't have the ability to prosecute everyone they track, is what they do is they share that information with local law enforcement, in this case, the NYPD. And then he lives in Brooklyn, so this caught the eye of this unit within the NYPD called the Ghost Gun Task Force. And ghost gun is just a name to, it's just a pejorative. It's just there to make people think, get people scared. All it means is the gun didn't have a serial number, and there's no functional difference between a ghost gun and a gun that has a serial number. So Dexter wasn't looking to cause any trouble or whatever. He was building these guns in his own home in his basement. And then in April of 2022, a joint SWAT team raid between the NYPD and ATF. If you look at the videos, you'll see them breaking into, and I can share these videos with you, breaking into his home. And he's like, who are you looking for? He in his mind, why would the police come looking for him? He's a law-abiding citizen. And turns out, we're looking for you, and we know who you are. And so then, you see this interaction between him and these, SWAT team guys. See some of them with ATF, and most of them were NYPD. they arrest him. He spent a week in Rikers Island before his family could come up with bail. We were with him from the beginning at his original arraignment. And the DA, the Brooklyn District Attorney, so this is state court in New York. So right now he's in Rikers Island, not in federal prison. So he's being held in Rikers Island. We filed a motion to dismiss because within a month after his arrest, the Bruin decision came down from the United States Supreme Court, which knocked out New York's licensing procedures and found it unconstitutional. And New York just basically said to the U.S. Supreme Court and basically created the same licensing regime. So now people have to go through the same thing again, and it's nearly impossible to get a license to carry a handgun in New York City. And so we knew the DA's office wasn't giving any reasonable offer. The minimum is 3.5 years on these charges. They were offering and recommending 8 years initially. He didn't want any plea offer. So this is important to understand. Dexter is a Second Amendment. I don't want to use the word fundamentalist, but he believes in the Second Amendment. Yeah, and he speaks about this. He went on numerous podcasts. He's been on a number of different interviews. We were on Newsmax together as the trial was starting and talking about this case because he did not want me to get an offer from the DA's office and try to plead this down. And so the only defense he had was the Second Amendment. And this judge who presided over the case, state court judge, unfortunately, the truth is most of the state court judges, many of them are political hacks, and she's a political hack, and told us we couldn't argue the Second Amendment in court. Said this is New York, and the Second Amendment isn't relevant here. And so I was hamstrung. It was like, going into a boxing ring with two hands tied behind your back, and it's a boxing match. You can't, so you can't kick, right? So, and we knew this going in, and just a couple days ago, we were back for sentencing. So he got convicted a month ago, and she immediately put him into Rikers, even though he'd been out on bail, and I had asked for him to be released pending bail, knowing that we were going to appeal this all the way up and then take this to federal court. Because in order to get to federal court, you've got to, the word is exhaust, go through all your state court appeals, where we know we're going to lose because New York is so anti-Second Amendment. And then get to federal court where we believe we have a real shot at winning. And she refused to let him stay at Liberty. And she then gave him basically almost 3 times the minimum sentence. I mean, which was just excessive for a guy like him who had no record, wasn't selling these things. I mean, there was nothing. He never fired these weapons. I mean, it's a travesty, and thank you, Jason, for speaking about this, because people need to know about this. There are so many different aspects of this. And, when he was on some of the programs, he spoke about being a black conservative and how New York State tells him that he has to be afraid of white supremacists, but he's not allowed to arm himself to protect himself. So, there's so many angles of this. But anyway, sorry about the long-winded background, but there's a lot here, Jason.
No part of their argument was a suspicion that he was going to sell these guns or give them to his friends. Was that no part of their argument? Correct.
At no point this is basically a paperwork crime because he didn't apply for a license, which would have immunized him to most of the charges, right? He had built assault rifles, or what New York calls assault rifles, AR-15 type weapons, but again, he never took them out of his home. He never fired them. And, he's so good at what he did. It turned out when they took him and they tested him, they worked. So he's just a really smart dude.
And so Did he know when he was buying these parts and building these guns, did he know he was doing something that on paper was a crime?
He didn't view it that way. He believed that the law of the land is the Second Amendment, and he believed that he was following the law of the land. And in fact, he testified at trial, and he explained to the jury, and this is where the only part of the trial where we got some bit of this, because in the beginning, even in my opening statement, 2 sentences into the opening statement, the judge interrupted my opening statement and pulled me into the back without objection from the prosecution, by the way, and said, "You're, confusing the jury." And we in the back, away from outside the presence jury, I told, "This is outrageous. No judge has interrupted my opening statement." And all I said at this point is, jurors are instructed that they are the judges of the facts. She's the judge of the law. And I said, there are 13 judges in this room, and no one has more power over each other. She didn't like that, because what I was doing was trying to empower the jury, because all I could do without being able to argue the Second Amendment was basically hope for what we call jury nullification, which was that, notwithstanding the fact that, he admitted he didn't have a license from New York State, that he built these guns. So no point where we like saying, oh, they were in his home, but they weren't his. He was like, nope, I built these guns. I'm proud of them. I had a natural right to possess firearms from the day that he was born. He testified to this. It was, New York doesn't want to hear it, New York State, and it's only unfortunately, well, let me take a step back. It's unfortunate that a great man like him has to sit in prison, but he is fully willing to do that, to get to federal court and challenge this and hopefully change New York laws. Because when he was going on these different things, people would say, why don't you just get out of New York? Move to Texas, move to Florida. And he's like, I'm a New Yorker. It's my duty. I don't want to leave New York. I want to change New York. I mean, he's my hero. He's become my hero.
How long will he have to sit in Rikers before this gets to the federal system? How long of a stretch are we looking at here before we get to appeal this federally?
Yeah. So about a month from now, he's got about another month before he's transferred to state prison, upstate. So he's going to go upstate in roughly 4 to 6 weeks. But then it could literally take years, Jason, because you've got to go through so he's at the trial court right now. He's got to go through the intermediate appellate court, and then he's got to go to New York's highest court, which sits in Albany, and then come back down to federal district court, which is in Brooklyn. And then I think we have a good shot there. If we lose, or even if we win, the state may appeal to the intermediate appellate court. So this case may get to the U.S. Supreme Court one day. But to just put things in perspective, and I don't in any way whatsoever, and I hope this doesn't become the quote, but to give you a perspective, you recently heard that Harvey Weinstein had his conviction reversed in New York State, right? That took 5 years, and that was to reach the high court in Albany. And that's Harvey Weinstein. And that didn't get to federal court. He got his case reversed in Albany. I don't anticipate we're going to get our case reversed in state court. So we got to then lose in the intermediate court, then the high court in Albany to get back to federal trial court. It's called district court. The Eastern District of New York, which actually, ironically, sits right across the street from the courthouse, the state courthouse where he was convicted. So it could take several years. And the reality is that he could be sitting in prison by the time he wins on appeal. I mean, that's or he could potentially finish his sentence by the time this case is heard. But he understood that. He was willing to do that. He specifically instructed me not to seek out a plea deal from the DAs, because if I'd gone to them and asked them for a plea deal, I probably could have gotten him something like 2.5 years.
Is there any other remedy? Could the governor step in? Is there any other light at the end of the tunnel?
The governor could absolutely step in and pardon him or commute his sentence. I highly doubt. I would think we've got a, you've got a chance of getting back on ESPN before that happens. Jason. You see, I'm a fan, Jason. I've been following you for years.
Yeah, that is definitely you just proved. Yeah, you're not exaggerating. You've been following me. Yeah.
I've been following you.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I'm saying. Chances of that is slim to none. I mean, it's none. There's no way that the woman who said the U.S. Supreme Court was reckless when it issued the decision knocking out New York's regime is going to pardon Dexter Taylor.
How are his spirits?
He's great. He's like, he greets everybody. When I visited him at Rikers, he was just like, people sort of know who he is, and they're like, oh, this is a guy. He's not a gangbanger. He's just smart. He helps everybody. The guards love him. When he was in, I've never seen a guy treated so well by court officers. They treated him like royalty because many of them are Second Amendment people. And obviously they're working for the state, so they can't say anything. But so many of them went up to him afterwards, and I heard some of this. Dude, stay strong, man. You shouldn't be sitting where you're sitting, and hopefully your case will get you out one day. But the interesting thing about this case, Jason, is that New York says, talks about crime, and you've heard stories about how all these guys are doing all these crimes, are out on the street, and yet Dexter Taylor sits in prison. So I asked the jurors, because again, my hands were tied. I couldn't make arguments. This judge was threatening my law license. I mean, it didn't bother me. I've had my law license threatened before by, judges who've lost their mind. But what I was able to say is ask yourselves, jurors, is Dexter Taylor the kind of person you want behind bars? And, the problem was the judge instructed them that they must follow the law. Now, that's a standard charge. And the law says, and she told them the Second Amendment's not relevant, for your consideration. You are here to consider the law in New York State, and that's it. So basically, and she also told them that if you don't follow the law, there are going to be consequences. So those were her exact words. And, it's a, the fix was in from the beginning. And there's the other thing you can't make up, Jason, that she is married to the DA's top fundraiser. And, what happens in a case like this, is that Dexter's, a black man. I represent him. Obviously, my color, my pigmentation, you can look at, across the thing. And we had a prosecutor who was white, who was like doing his job. He was the one handling the case from the beginning. A month before trial, the case gets transferred to a black prosecutor who had nothing to do with the case. And, we had a white judge who I had been dealing with. And then the day that we're set for trial, the parties agreed on, it gets transferred to the only black judge in that court. So who just happens to be married to the DA's top fundraiser. So the Brooklyn DA, tried to eliminate any bit of racial thought, thought, this is how governments work. It's not the first time this has happened to me, where, I represent a defendant of color, and then the prosecutor magically changes, as we get to trial.
Yeah, Dexter's paying the black conservative tax that is really, really astronomical in a state like New York, with racist liberals. Vinoo, thank you so much for coming on and sharing Dexter's story. We'll be praying for Dexter. I believe we have a Give, Send, Go for Dexter. Can we put that on screen, please, and reference that? What's the is there Gibson Go, you just go to Dexter Taylor? Is that all you need to
if you
do?
just put Dexter Taylor, you got it right there. Dexter Taylor 2A Legal Fund. If you just put Dexter Taylor Gibson Go, it'll pop right up on Google. So thank you so much, Jason, for having me and for talking about this. It means a lot. And this is the kind of thing that if we can get more people talking about this, who knows, maybe something will change in Albany.